I've been doing stand-up now so I started when I was 19 and I'm 38 now.
Mhm.
Um, so my comedy career is an adult.
Uh-huh.
But I started here in Columbus in 2006. So before that, I was in California in college, and then I came back here. And I'm from here, but I moved back here. And so I've been doing stand-up since 2006. Um, I took a couple years off during well, I mean, everybody took a couple years off during the pandemic,
Yeah.
but mine was actually planned time off. And since I've been back, my focus is a little bit different than it was before. So I kind of just take gigs that I want to do, I guess, more so than taking whatever's available, which is what I was doing
Yeah.
before. There's a lot of hustle culture with comedy and
Hmm.
performers and a lot of
Yeah.
that. I think that was what burned me out before, was a lot of the
Yeah.
hustle. And I have a family, I have a day job. I want to have a good art life balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So making sure that I'm spending enough time with my family and also focusing on my career, and then taking the gigs that I want to take. So yeah, I am in kind of the rotation for hosts and features at the local comedy club here. I've done
Hmm.
some of the other comedy clubs around Ohio. I'm not traveling as much as I was before. And then I do some local shows with honestly with people that I like to hang out with. You know? I like to do the local shows that I know are good, that are run well, that get a good audience, and also just like to do the shows with friends of mine that have also been in the scene for a long time. So I think for the
Yeah.
longest time, and I think a lot of performers feel this way, is that like the idea of making it is not having to have another job, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like if
Hmm.
you can do comedy full time or art full time or music full time, you don't have to have a day job to pay the bills. Um,
Hmm.
and that's sort of what's always been the marker of making it to a certain extent. And I shifted my focus to uh, not needing to do that, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
feel like I need to do that to feel successful. I feel a
Yeah.
lot more comfortable having a steady income, having a job that I enjoy, a job that gives me health benefits and things like that, and then setting different goals for myself in comedy. It takes away
Yeah.
that pressure of like, how much money am I making doing this? When's my next gig? So now if I go a month without having a gig, it's not the end of the world. I don't feel that same pressure. I like not going a month because I like to exercise and hustle and I enjoy, doing shows, but I don't feel the same pressure, and I think I'm able to enjoy it
That's
more.
a good question. Yeah. What's made you stick with comedy, and maybe what are some specific aspects of that?
That's a really great question. I stick with it because I love doing it. I love the laughter, that
Hmm.
feeling of being on stage and getting a reaction from the audience. It's also a really important creative outlet for me. I've noticed at times when I'm not performing or when I did take time off, I needed something to
Hmm.
let my creativity out. Um,
Yeah.
I started to feel kind of uh, just, I don't want to say, I don't know, just started to feel kind of down, I guess, or
Hmm.
maybe a little bit like I was losing myself. Like it's an important
Hmm.
part of who I am to be able to write about my life experiences and write about things in that way, and express them on stage. I Even if it's not stand up necessarily, for a period of time, I was working at Shadowbox Live Theater here in Columbus, and I was on their sketch writing team. And that was another great like creative outlet for ways that I could express things that were either going on in my life, or things I felt strongly about, writing sketch comedy, writing characters that even I wasn't going to play. And
Yeah.
I loved the satisfaction of like sitting in the audience watching other actors play characters that I wrote or words that I wrote, and then hearing an audience laugh at that is just like, and just sitting amongst people and them not even knowing that I wrote that stuff, just like an amazing feeling. So even if it's not stand up, I always felt a need to have that creative outlet. And I think that's why I've stuck with it. I'm also not great at a lot of other creative things. Like, I can't sing. I'm not a dancer. I'm not, I did acting. I've thought about maybe getting back into that, but that's a different level of commitment. You're committed to a group, to a cast, to a certain schedule. I've thought about that because I've done a little bit of improv as well, but always as a guest performer. I was never part of a specific troupe. Well, not since college. I was in a group in college, but not since we started performing here. I was never part of a troupe. I think there is that that ability to just do it on my own that I also about stand up. Is that if I say yes or no to a gig, it really only affects me.
Yeah, that's cool. Just out of curiosity, where'd you go to school out here?
I went to school at University of California, Santa Barbara.
Oh yeah.
So I was in acting.
The party you see.
That's what everybody says. I didn't know it was a party school when I applied there and when I started going there, and then I quickly learned that it was and then did not graduate because it was such a party school. I definitely got sucked into a lot of, honestly, a lot of drinking and drugs while I was out there, and came back here, got clean, and am a lot better for it. It's still a fantastic school, fantastic experience. Wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned a lot about myself, but their acting program is top notch. And a lot of the other students that I was in classes with have gone on to do some great things. So I love seeing that, and wish I had been able to stay and finish it. I've thought about going back sometimes, but I don't know. I'm 38 now.
I loved improv. I love scripted scenes too, in a different way.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of two sides of like the same, like it was like the same muscle sort of, but exercised in different ways.
Yeah, it's different watching it too, like what you enjoy about it. Like I enjoy the kind of beautiful chaos of watching improv, and those moments where somebody says something really funny and knowing that that's just in the moment and happening in the moment. That's so like beautiful for me to watch. And seeing people like be witty on the spot. It's like when you watch sketch, it's really more about, like, what I enjoy about it is thinking about the thought process that got that to the stage, and what the message is, and finding ways to write about my life as a parent in ways that relate to audiences that have kids, but also audiences that don't have kids. I have a tendency to adjust my material based on what audience I'm in front of. And if I start into a lot of mom material, and typically I'll ask, like, oh, are there parents here? Like, make some noise if you're a parent. And if there's not a lot of parents, I'm like, well, I think I need to pivot away from this. But if it's a lot of parents, and I'm like, okay, well, get ready for 20 minutes of a language of humor. Yeah.
The language of humor.
Yeah.
On that note, one question that I like to ask is, you mentioned the fact that for you, comedy like has staying power because it's an important creative outlet. And I'm very interested in creativity in all forms. I think one question that I have is, with writing and performing and everything, is there like a means that you stay creative, or like, is there a way that you think about creativity when you're making stuff that like helps, I would say, kind of like, how do you feed your creativity, I guess is what I'm asking. How
do I feed my creativity? That's interesting. I I don't know if it needs fed for me. For me, it's more that it needs let out. Like, does that make sense? I
Mhm,
have, well, and especially with comedy, like, so, they say that comedy is tragedy plus time, right? So
mhm,
anything bad that happens in my life becomes fuel for comedy. Sometimes eventually, and sometimes right away. If it's your own personal tragedies, the amount of time that an audience needs isn't necessarily that much. uh, but yeah, I think I don't know how much I'm necessarily feeding my creativity as much as I am like my life is feeding the need for it, if that makes sense.
mhm.
Yeah.
That's a really good answer, Dan. You thought this through.
Oh,
But
not to say that I don't have writer's block or slumps or, times when there's not um anything coming. I think with comedy also you can kind of um you can do old material,
Mhm.
and if you have enough material, you can rotate through it to where you don't feel like you're doing the same stuff all the time. I do try to push myself to write new material. So I guess like, yeah, in that sense, what fuels me to keep writing, some of it's, that need to kind of let things out, but then also I like to go to workshops. So there's a couple of open mics here in Columbus that have like a workshop ahead of time. There's one at the Columbus Funny Bone that's great. And so they break people up into groups. And if you're working on something, then the other people will give you, punchlines or tags or suggestions. And though that always just makes me feel it fuels that desire to write. Even if I'm not working on anything, even if I'm just sitting there listening to other people or contributing to their jokes, it just like it gets that ball rolling, like you said.
Mhm.
Gets me in that mindset of writing and like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I have an idea that and and maybe I could write it like this, kind of at the same time. So, yeah. I have some ideas for shows that aren't necessarily just straight stand up. So for 5 years I worked at the upfront stage at Shadowbox Live. They have a front room space, and I worked together with the head writer at Shadowbox, Jimmy Mack. We hosted Tuesdays with Mac and Winks. Um,
Mhm.
he was Mac and I was Winks, and then we present a lot of shows, but we also
Uh-huh.
created a lot too, where we think like, oh, this holiday is coming up. What's a show we could do for this holiday? And people really liked the roasts that we were doing, and so we did a lot of like fictional character roasts. Um,
Mhm.
a guy a guy I was working with, Dustin Meadows, started doing them, and he would, it was like the roast of Batman. And so somebody would dress up like Batman, and then the rest of us would all dress up like other characters from Batman, and we would roast each other.
That is
And
a great idea. That's
so we would
hilarious.
start thinking of like other characters, or like, oh, there's, Halloween's coming up. Let's do a Halloween roast. It's like the roast of Dracula or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and then at the same time that I was working there, I was co-hosting a game show, a live trivia game show with my friend Eric Tate. He's a magician. He's a fantastic magician. Um, look him up if you don't know him. But he and I hosted a show together called the Quiz Box,
Mhm.
and it was impossible trivia was kind of the model. We would come up with news stories or weird facts that we thought people wouldn't be able to guess the answer to. And then we had a panel of 4 comedians that would try and guess the answers to these questions, but also make jokes while they were guessing the answers. And then they would win prizes for the audience based on which one of them got the most points. It was a lot of fun, and we also recorded it as a podcast. And I missed that show so much. It was a lot of work. Eric is working on much bigger and more important projects now, and we're still very close friends, but we just don't have the time or the means to work on a show like this together. Also, because it was impossible trivia, it required a lot of research, which Eric did the bulk of, looking up facts and writing trivia questions. I was the scorekeeper on the show. But I missed the show. I loved having multiple comedians on stage at once. I loved the interactive nature of something that was not stand up, but not improv. It's not like you're being yourself as
Mhm.
like most stand-ups do. You're on stage as yourself, but you're coming up with funny things on the spot. So yeah, so I'm trying to right now I'm just in idea phase, but I would love to come up with a new game show or a new kind of alternative comedy show. And I've been looking around Columbus for some venues that interest me to maybe do something like that. So I guess look for that on the horizon without spoiling too much.
Watch out, world. Yeah. I no, I mean, I think that sounds really cool, and like just from talking to you, it seems apparent to me that you have like a writer's mind, and also your style. I think like, which especially because your style, I feel like is kind of would provide good infrastructure writing with other people, like because you're even just your way of speaking, but also your comedy is just like fundamentally sound, and that sounds boring. That sounds boring,
No, it doesn't. That's actually a very nice compliment.
yeah, just like your delivery and your jokes and stuff like that. Like it's kind of like, I guess I wrote down that it was simple, but again, I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I think that I was really impressed, and I was wondering also, did you have when you were kind of developing your style, was there somebody in general that influenced you or something like, it could be like a movie or a comedian or whatever?
Yeah, I was influenced a lot and at a young age by original cast SNL. That's kind of what I grew up watching. My dad had like old VHS tapes of like, just old Saturday Night Live with like John Belushi and Gilda Radner and, Steve
Mm-hmm.
Martin. And I loved watching Bill Murray and Steve Martin and Martin Short together always were so great. And like, so I think that inspired me early on. When I started really wanting to do stand up, and this is another reason why people say like, oh, have you seen so and so's latest special? I have a hard time watching stand up because I'm kind of this sounds like I'm bragging or something. I'm kind of a natural mimic, which suited me
Mm-hmm.
really well when I was doing sketch comedy. If particularly at Shadowbox, if somebody was like off for a night and they needed somebody to like fill in for a role that already existed, I was really good at like, I can take this person's role and pretty much do it exactly like them because I've heard them do it enough times that I just like copied their same patterns.
Mm-hmm.
But because of that, if I watch too much stand up, I find myself copying somebody else's style, not stealing jokes, but when I was listening to a lot of Mitch Hedberg, for example, I would find myself writing more one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite that I like that I listen to right now is Jim Gaffigan. I absolutely love him. And I feel like I'm able to listen to him without necessarily copying his style. But what I really like about him is that he talks about simple things. And again, not an insult, but he talks about very relatable things, talks about family life. He can talk for 10 minutes about socks and it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like that it's clean and that it's simple and that it's relatable. So yeah, I think that he's probably my biggest current inspiration, although I have to be careful watching too much. Yeah. And
Yeah, he's cool.
tying
I
back to
like.
like what you were saying about like who inspires me. I love watching the other people that I'm on a show with. Like the other
Mhm.
and my friends inspire me as cheesy as that sounds, but like people I know in the comedy community and watching them grow and watching them try new things and seeing them do a new bit, like all that stuff definitely inspires me. Honestly I've struggled with that sometimes about things that I write that are even current to me. I wrote a lot of material while I was pregnant because I was still performing while I was pregnant and trying to find ways of taking that material, which was good, and still make it funny, even though I'm not pregnant now, has been a challenge. And I don't think a lot of those jokes don't hit as hard without the big belly. Like
Mhm.
talking about it in past tense for whatever reason isn't as funny as talking
Mhm.
about it now. And topical humor, of course, is a lot like that. And people get burned out on it quicker if it's something in the media,
Mhm. Mhm.
um I I can tell audience is already a little fatigued hearing about, you know, Chris Rock references or yeah, I mean, there is a sense of like breaking the tension for an elephant in the room, you know, and sometimes the elephant in the room isn't in the room. It's what's happening in society. And so you want to talk about it. The pandemic, of course, was a big one, you know, because people would want to break the tension of, oh, we're all, especially once people started coming back and congregating and going to shows and there was social distancing and you still had to wear masks, but then you could take them off at your tables and you're sitting there watching a comedian hoping you don't get COVID and you want the comedian to like break that tension, but then you also don't want to listen to like an hour of jokes about it.
Yes.
Kind of finding that balance. And I think going back to the example of Will Smith and Chris Rock, you know, that was another one. There was like comedians felt like they needed to break that tension because that was something that a lot of us were afraid of happening after that was like, oh, you know, what if people come up here and slap me during my show? And you kind of want to break that tension, but you also don't want to beat a dead horse.
Just don't tell me the same like build of joke that I've heard 100 times before, because it will make me furious.
And that is the benefit of watching a lot of comedy and sometimes maybe where I fall short because I don't watch a lot of it. I do end up sometimes with parallel writing or like talking about something that a lot of other women in particular have talked about. I do talk about my son when I talk about, you know, having a baby, like you count pregnancy in weeks and you count, you know, your child's age in months. And then the joke that I was doing that's now been done is that you count a prison sentence down in days. You know what I mean? Like those are but I've seen enough other women that have a joke that's similar that I'm like, I just don't do that part of it anymore. I think it's been done. Because I feel like Amy Schumer had like I did watch hers about pregnancy and she had on a lot of stuff that was similar to things that I was doing. And I was like, well, I'm not Amy Schumer. Nobody knows whether or not I was talking about these things beforehand. Like she's Amy Schumer, she gets to have that. So I retired some stuff that was similar enough that, you know, it just wasn't worth it.
What I was saying about it, I feel like it's an achievement. What would you say are things that you learn from the process, like just big picture life wise, and how would you say you change as a person through that process?
Oh wow, yeah, those are big questions. Well, just going quickly off of what you were saying about how anybody can benefit from it, I totally agree with that. I think the same about therapy as I do recovery, that anybody can benefit from going to a therapist. You don't have to have, you know, a diagnosed mental illness to benefit from therapy. You don't have to hit rock bottom to benefit from recovery. And you don't even necessarily have to quit, you know, drinking completely in order to benefit from going to an AA meeting. Learning about it and learning about what other people struggle with and maybe say, okay, well, how can I apply some of these things to my lifestyle? And I like that the conversation is becoming more open about those things. I like seeing people on social media celebrating, I'm this many months sober, or I just quit smoking cigarettes, or anything that they're doing, and celebrating those things is great, that our society is embracing that more. Even things like dry January or sober October, and allowing people to say like, I'm just going to get sober for a month. And I've seen people that are like, yeah, that was a great month. I feel refreshed. And now I'm going to go back to the bar and that's fine. And then other people say like, and that's fine for them. They can handle that. And then there's other people who are like, oh, I did this for a month and I feel a lot better. And I don't want to go back to that. Even if it's not a problem, and that's like, I guess for me, I benefited from hitting what I considered rock bottom. I couldn't finish school. It was interfering with my life enough that I came back to Ohio, moved back in with my parents, went through, you know, a recovery program to get myself clean and to get some therapy and get some help. And now I'm back on my feet. And that's not to say that I haven't had a drink since, you know.
Mm.
um Alcohol wasn't as big of a problem for me as drugs were, and so I came clean from drugs, and then I also have had times where alcohol became a problem and I quit,
Mhm.
or times when I felt comfortable drinking socially. I don't drink alcohol now, um, mostly because I'm 38 and two drinks will make me feel like crap the next day. So it's just not worth it physically, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Any reason anybody wants to quit is fine. And I
Mhm.
think, okay, so your questions were, I guess, what did I learn big picture from it?
Mhm. Like, was there something that you learned about yourself, or was there something that you took away?
Yeah.
Like, because I, like, for example, I think for me, moving past stuff that has an addictive quality in my life, even if it's just momentarily, is a lot about being present and stuff, you know, usually it comes down to like a coping mechanism for something, whatever it is, whether it's like wasting my time on my phone, or like making bad decisions or drinking, whatever it is, it's usually like a coping mechanism, basically, of like, I'm feeling stress,
Yeah.
don't want to deal with it, and so I'm going to like do X. And I think that for me, like the way to not do those things and to like, and it's like wrapped in the same thing, is being present, being present in kind of like bad feelings or stress and stuff like that, and letting yourself kind of like ride the waves, instead of just like holding your breath and just like sitting underwater, basically.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's similar for me, that I want to be present in my life. I want to enjoy my life. And I figured out that I can enjoy just as much not having alcohol as and more, honestly, than I can
Mm-hmm.
having that. Um, for me, a lot of it was about loss of control. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like the loss of control that I got when I was either drinking too much or doing drugs. And a lot of it was about trying to escape things that I didn't want to feel, and being present in those feelings, allowing myself to have highs and lows. Um, you know, as I talked about before, now my outlet for those lows is to write about it rather
Yeah.
than to bury it.
Yeah.
Um, there are times when I feel like I miss out on some fun, and it's hard sometimes now when I go to a bar and I say, what do you have without alcohol in it? And they're like, water. I do see that there are a lot more bars that are offering more drinks now, that, or they have like O'Doul's or some sort of non-alcoholic beer, and that's just not what I want. So there are more non-alcoholic cocktails that are being offered. There's a place here in Columbus called Dry Mill that's like a completely sober bar, and they have delicious cocktails with like that taste like real cocktails. And they
Mm-hmm.
have all of these, like a taste like tequila kind of thing, or tastes like, I mean, I don't know why you would want to taste tequila, but but it makes them taste like delicious cocktails without having that same effect. But yeah, um, do I think there are things that I miss out on? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth it to miss out on those things in order to experience the things that I get in return? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it does get easier for anybody who's watching this or listening to this or reading this. It does get easier. And um, funny enough for me, when I first quit drinking, I was working as a bartender. But I was working in the bar. I was working in the bar. I wasn't drinking in the bar.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't drink while I was working, but it allowed me to like be around it and see everybody else making the same stupid choices that I would make. And
Mm-hmm.
for me to say, okay, I don't want to do that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, in a weird way that worked for me. And I've actually known other people that were bartenders and quit drinking and were able to continue bartending. But yeah, it's a struggle for anybody who's trying to get through that point. So I do get that it's hard when all of your friends still keep drinking.
Yeah.
But I don't know, takes time. And once you get there, it feels so much better. Yeah. I
Or
mean,
this, yeah.
if you're
Well,
in Ohio or really anywhere, don't tell comedy is my new jam. I love it. I love doing those shows, and I just love the whole model of it. It's very exciting. And I think their website says it's comedy's worst kept secret. It's not hard to find out who's going to be on the show if you do a little digging, but it's more fun if you show up and you don't know who's going to be on it. You know, that I promote the shows that I'm on, which is telling the don't tell part. But but you can also go online and figure out the end to every Marvel movie as well. So you know the where you want to go if you want surprises. But yeah, but it's really fun because it's you buy a ticket, you don't know where it's going to be or who's going to be on the show. You find out the location, you show up, and then you don't know who's on the show until you get there. And a lot of times they get like traveling headliners, and there's locals that fill up the rest of the lineup. It's so much fun. I'm not like affiliated at all in the I really am not. I know the people who run it, and they run a really great show. The people who run it locally here in Columbus, I don't know who don't tell is. It's
whoever they are.
whoever they are, they're brilliant. But yeah, I know the guys who run it locally, and they always put on great shows, and they always find really cool venues and stuff too, and great comics. So yeah. Yeah, and then also if you're in Columbus, check out the Columbus Funny Bone. You can see me there sometimes too. So
Awesome. Well, that's a great way to end it. Like I said, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you.